Zoe Marsh moved through the crowded school cafeteria with practiced ease, balancing trays of colorful food with a steady hand. The clatter of plates and the excited chatter of children filled the air, but Zoe's mind was elsewhere. Her green apron was spotless, her hair pulled back neatly, yet her eyes carried the quiet weight of years spent in a job that few noticed beyond the lunch hour. She glanced briefly at the students, trying to catch the smiles of the little ones she secretly adored. Serving these meals was more than a job to her, it was a kind of care she hoped they felt with every bite. Across the room, Lydia Crane sat at a long table with a few other parents, her posture rigid and her face carefully composed. She wore an expensive navy blazer that flashed with silver buttons and her hair was styled just so. Lydia held the unofficial role of the PTA president and wielded her influence like a sharp-edged blade. Her cool gaze flicked toward Zoe, who was quietly cleaning the counters behind the serving line. To Lydia, Zoe was just a lunch lady, a background presence who didn't belong in the polished world of school meetings and fundraisers. Lydia's voice suddenly pierced the hum of the cafeteria. "Is that really what passes for lunch here?" she sneered loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I can't believe the school allows this kind of sloppiness." "Zoe, is it? Are you really qualified to serve the children? This looks terrible." The murmurs grew among the students and staff. Zoe's hands stilled momentarily, a knot tightening in her stomach. She tried to answer politely, but Lydia cut her off with a raised eyebrow. "Honestly, I think this place needs a complete overhaul. I'll be making a formal complaint to the mayor if this doesn't change." The atmosphere shifted palpably as eyes turned toward them, leaving Zoe feeling suddenly small and exposed. The tension in the cafeteria had barely settled when the murmurs of footsteps announced the arrival of Mayor Harris. The room's noisy hum hushed almost instantly, students and staff alike turning their eyes toward the doorway. Zoe felt the weight of all those gazes settle on her once more. Her heart pounded fiercely in her chest, a mixture of nerves and cautious hope coiling inside her. Mayor Harris was a large man in his late 50s, known around town for his approachable demeanor and commitment to community welfare. Today, he wore a navy blazer over a light blue shirt, sleeves casually rolled up to the forearms, and a warm smile that seemed genuine. Despite the formality of his office, there was something comforting about the way he carried himself, as if he was one of the town's own, not above anyone. He scanned the cafeteria with a discerning but friendly eye before his gaze settled on Zoe. "You must be Zoe Marsh," he said warmly, stepping forward. "I hear you've been doing some interesting work in the kitchen." Zoe swallowed hard but managed a polite nod. "Yes, Mayor Harris. I try my best to make sure the meals are both nutritious and tasty for the kids." Her voice was quieter than she wished but steady. The mayor looked around at her food station. The counters gleamed under the fluorescent lights, trays were neatly organized, and behind her line was a colorful spread of fruits, vegetables, and steaming dishes. "I understand you've made some changes to the menu?" he inquired. "Yes, sir. I've been studying child nutrition through online courses and working with local farmers to source fresh ingredients. The goal is to improve the children's health without sacrificing flavor." She began explaining the new dishes she'd created, features like grain bowls, vegetable stir-fries, and homemade soups. The mayor listened attentively, occasionally nodding. As Zoe spoke, a subtle buzz rose from the bystanders, teachers exchanged impressed looks, and even some parents, previously critical, seemed intrigued. Lydia Crane stood off to the side, lips pressed into a thin line, her arms crossed tightly. "I think it's wonderful you're so dedicated," Mayor Harris said finally. "Why don't I try one of your dishes myself?" Zoe was stunned but quickly prepared a small plate of her special quinoa and vegetable medley, a dish she'd perfected with vibrant flavors and wholesome ingredients. The mayor accepted the plate with a gracious nod, taking a careful bite. He said thoughtfully. "This is remarkable. Balanced, fresh, and flavorful. Just what growing kids need." His approval was genuine and loud enough for everyone to hear. Lydia's face tightened. "Mayor, are you really going to defend this? I've witnessed the mess in this cafeteria, the subpar food served to our children." Her tone was sharp, an obvious challenge. The mayor turned to Lydia, eyebrows raised slightly. "I appreciate your concern, Lydia, but it's important we recognize honest effort and progress when we see it." His eyes met hers steadily. "Public insults do no one any good, and I expect everyone in this school to treat staff with respect." A few parents nodded, some even clapped quietly. Lydia's expression faltered under the unexpected rebuke, her power momentarily diminished in the mayor's presence. Students began to chime in too, voices soft at first, then with more confidence. "I like the quinoa dish," one girl called out. "It tastes different but really good," chimed a boy. Some teachers smiled, admitting quietly they'd never thought much about the cafeteria menu but now were interested. Zoe felt a flush of pride warming her cheeks but kept her composure. This was a moment she had barely dared hope for, an acknowledgement of her passion and work that Lydia's biting remarks had tried to erase. Mayor Harris continued, "From now on, I'll be more involved in visiting the schools personally. We'll help provide resources to support staff like Zoe who go above and beyond." His words carried weight that suggested real change. Lydia muttered something under her breath, her influence clearly waning as the crowd's mood shifted. As the mayor mingled briefly with students and chatted with teachers, Zoe allowed herself a small smile, one that reached her eyes. She caught the eye of her assistant, who gave her a thumbs up. The bitterness of earlier moments receded, replaced by a sense of community and hope. Later, when the mayor left amidst a backdrop of appreciative waves and thank yous, Zoe stayed behind to clear up. The cafeteria buzzed with quiet conversations about the visit. For once, the tired routine felt different, charged with possibility. Despite this, Zoe couldn't ignore the glance Lydia shot her way, a mixture of resentment and disbelief. But Zoe felt ready now, buoyed by the mayor's support and the quiet admiration of the children she served. In the following days, small but meaningful changes rippled through the school. Staff became more attentive to Zoe's ideas, parents asked for recipes and recommended dishes, the news of the mayor's commendation spread quietly but surely. Though Lydia remained part of school functions, her sharp critiques lost their edge as the community rallied around Zoe, a woman whose simple appearance had masked a deep well of skill, resilience, and care. Zoe reflected on the week's events privately, feeling a mix of relief and renewed determination. She was no longer invisible, no longer quiet beneath harsh words. As she prepared meals each day, she thought often about the children's faces and the promise that her work mattered. And for the first time in a long while, she looked forward to what the next lunch hour would bring. The days after Mayor Harris's visit shifted the rhythm of the school cafeteria in ways Zoe had never imagined. The dull hum of routine began to pulse with energy and expectation. Teachers nodded greetings in the hallways with newfound warmth, parents chatted behind her back, this time with admiration rather than whispers of complaint. Yet, among the bustling reassurance, a storm was still gathering in the form of Lydia Crane, the PTA president whose sharp tongue had set the conflict into motion. On Thursday morning, the school's weekly assembly announced something that made every stomach in the building twist. Lydia had arranged a challenge to evaluate Zoe's culinary skills in front of the entire faculty and parent committee at the next PTA meeting. The purpose was thinly veiled as a quality check but clearly aimed at undermining Zoe. Zoe heard the news through a whisper among the lunch staff as she prepared the kitchen. Her hands faltered for a moment, but then steeled themselves around the ladle she held. Fear wanted to claw inside her heart, but firm resolve smoothed the edges. This was her moment to prove the worth of her dedication. When the day arrived, the PTA room was crowded with expectant faces. Parents in tailored suits and polished shoes filled the chairs alongside teachers and school administrators. Lydia sat prominently at the head of the table, her expression a cold mask of self-confidence. The principal gave Zoe a supportive smile from the side. The task was clear. Lydia demanded Zoe prepare a dish from scratch in front of the room, using ingredients laid out on a table, simple vegetables, grains, and spices. "Let's see if the lunch lady can whip up something worthy of the mayor's praise," Lydia sneered. Murmurs of amusement rippled through the room. Zoe stepped forward, carrying her composure like armor. "Thank you for this opportunity," she said calmly, beginning to sort the ingredients into neat piles. As she started chopping onions and peppers with practiced precision, a hush settled. The room watched, some skeptical, others curious. She spoke softly as she worked, explaining why she chose each ingredient and how they contributed to children's nutrition and energy. "Whole grains provide sustained carbohydrates to fuel growing brains," she said, "while colorful vegetables offer vital vitamins and antioxidants." The technical terms slipped naturally from her lips like second nature, surprising even some of the seasoned professionals in the room. Lydia rolled her eyes but said nothing, narrowing her gaze. Zoe's hands moved swiftly, the rhythm of slicing and seasoning growing brisk. The aromas began to fill the room, the sweet scent of sautéed garlic mingled with earthy herbs and warm spices. Minutes passed, and Zoe combined the ingredients into a vibrant vegetable pilaf, garnished with freshly chopped herbs. She plated the dish carefully and set it in front of the principal and a few volunteers who agreed to taste. The room held its breath as the first forkful was sampled. The principal's eyebrows lifted in surprise as he swallowed thoughtfully. Another volunteer smiled and nodded. Whispered compliments began to ripple through the gathered crowd, voices raised in genuine appreciation. Even some parents who had previously followed Lydia's lead whispered, "That's really good," and "I'd eat this anytime." Lydia's resolve cracked momentarily, her smug expression faltered. Yet she refused to concede defeat outright, pressing for more details. "You expect us to believe that this simple meal is what the kids get every day?" Her tone was sharp, but shaken. Zoe nodded confidently. "Yes. Along with other diverse options that meet specific dietary needs. I constantly update menus based on guidelines and feedback, ensuring quality and taste. My goal is to nourish these children properly, to support their learning and growth." A few teachers spoke up, sharing stories of children enjoying Zoe's meals, glowing with health improvements. The parents' voices grew louder, now challenging Lydia's earlier critiques rather than supporting them. The tide had unmistakably turned. A ripple of laughter escaped from a group of students who had been invited to observe. They called out, "We love Mrs. Marsh's food. It tastes way better than before." Their youthful honesty delighted the room and underscored the truth of Zoe's commitment. Lydia sat back, her face taut with frustration and defeat. The PTA president's authority had been publicly diminished, the community's opinion clearly shifting in Zoe's favor. When the session concluded, Zoe was approached by a few parents who thanked her sincerely and asked how they could help support her work. The principal praised her openly, and the mayor's endorsement felt not like a distant memory but a living promise now embodied by Zoe's demonstration. Later that afternoon, Zoe found a quiet moment in the kitchen. As she wiped down the counters, her hands trembled slightly, not from fatigue but the overwhelming sensation of validation. All those years of quiet effort, of working in the shadows, had finally come to light. She thought back to the beginning, to Lydia's scornful eyes and cutting words, and marveled at the strength it had taken to endure. Now, standing on this new ground, Zoe carried herself with a quiet pride. Her assistant leaned in, whispering with a smile, "You surprised everyone today, especially Lydia." Zoe smiled softly. "I surprised myself." News of her success spread quickly, showing up in local newsletters and community forums. Zoe was no longer just the school lunch lady, she had become an example of perseverance, talent, and love for the community. More importantly, the children saw her differently. One day, a small boy tugged at her sleeve, grinning as he declared, "Mrs. Marsh, you made my favorite lunch ever." Can you teach me how to cook? Zoe chuckled and ruffled his hair. Maybe one day. For now, just enjoy the meal. Her kitchen had transformed from a place of toil and invisibility into a space of creativity and recognition. The power of food to heal and bring people together was no longer just a belief, it was a reality she helped build every day. Though Lydia had not disappeared, her presence still lingered at school functions, her status had visibly shifted. The arrogance that once intimidated others was now met with polite distance or quiet rebuttal. Zoe knew this journey was far from over. Respect and recognition were continually earned, and she intended to keep proving why she belonged. For now, though, she allowed herself to savor the moment, knowing that beneath the simple apron and tired eyes was a woman whose hidden talent had finally been seen. One who would never again be underestimated. After the pivotal moment at the PTA meeting, Zoe found herself surrounded not just by recognition but by curiosity, questions about her past, her motivations, and the quiet strength behind her humble presence. One afternoon, as the midday sun cast long shadows over the schoolyard, Zoe sat with Emily, a young teacher who had become an early supporter and friend. They shared a quiet corner of the teacher's lounge, the soft murmur of students and distant laughter a comforting backdrop. Emily, sipping her coffee, asked gently, "Zoe, I've been meaning to ask, how did you develop such incredible cooking skills? You make it all look effortless, though I know it isn't. And you always seem so calm and so sure, even when things get tough." Zoe smiled, the kind of smile that held stories. "Honestly, I never expected to be here, doing exactly this," she began. "Years ago, I worked as a chef in a highly regarded restaurant downtown. The kitchen was fast-paced, competitive, and, at times, unforgiving." She paused, thinking back to those days, the clatter of pots and pans, the rush of dinner service. "I loved the art of it, the creativity, the precision. But life has a way of changing plans." Emily nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I had to leave that world behind for a while," Zoe said softly. "Circumstances brought me here, a simpler role. When I first started as a lunch lady, I was worn out from travel, from trying to make ends meet, from the pressures that pressed on me from every side. I dressed simply because I didn't have many options, and I kept my head down. But the one thing I never stopped was caring, for food, for people who eat it, especially children." Emily's eyes shone with understanding. "So that's why you've been redesigning the menu, pushing for quality and nutrition. It's your passion, not just a job." "Yes," Zoe replied. "I've taken online courses, read everything I can about child nutrition, and sought out local farmers to get the best ingredients we can afford. Every plate is a little lesson in health, a message to the kids that good food matters." As she spoke, Zoe's hands unconsciously folded and unfolded on her lap, a subtle sign of nerve still lingering beneath the calm. "I never wanted to parade my past around. I was tired of the judgments that come with appearances. I wanted my work to speak for itself. But lately, I realized that sometimes, people need to know the person behind the apron to truly see them." Emily reached over, placing a hand on Zoe's. "I think the community is starting to see you for who you really are, and we're lucky to have you." The conversation marked a turning point. More colleagues sought Zoe out, curious and supportive rather than distant and indifferent. Her story spread gradually through the school community, not as gossip but as inspiration. The realization that beneath her simple exterior was a talented chef who had chosen this work out of love rather than obligation resonated deeply. The cafeteria itself began to transform beyond menu changes. Staff members who had once avoided eye contact now waved or asked Zoe's advice. Teachers invited her to classroom events, eager to incorporate lessons about nutrition. On some days, parents volunteered in the kitchen, learning how their children's lunches were prepared and discovering the care Zoe poured into every meal. Even the students grew more attentive. Zoe would find small notes tucked into her apron pocket. "Thank you for making lunch fun, "You're the best, Mrs. Marsh." These simple gestures filled her with a quiet gratitude that fueled her resolve. Yet, amid the growing acceptance and warmth, Lydia Crane's shadow still lingered. The PTA president's expression became increasingly tense during meetings, her sharp words softened but always laced with passive resistance. She no longer openly criticized Zoe in the cafeteria or at public events, but her cold demeanor spoke volumes. One afternoon, as Zoe passed by the PTA meeting room, she overheard Lydia's voice, low and clipped, speaking to a few parents. "We must be cautious. Popularity doesn't equal competence. Standards must be maintained." The sentence rolled off with practiced authority but lacked conviction. Zoe recognized the fight wasn't over. Lydia's discomfort was clear, a sign that Zoe's quiet victory had unsettled established power dynamics. But rather than fear it, Zoe felt a deepening sense of purpose. She had faced public scrutiny, loneliness, and doubt, and come through stronger. Away from school, her personal life reflected similar themes of resilience. At home, Zoe kept things simple. Her small apartment felt like a cozy retreat, filled with cookbooks, jars of spices, and the soft hum of a slow cooker simmering on the stove. It was a space where she could experiment with recipes and relax after long days. Her husband, Daniel, was her pillar. Though he worked long hours as an architect, he always made time for Zoe. Their marriage wasn't flashy, but it was solid, built on shared laughter and mutual respect. Daniel often marveled at Zoe's dedication and celebrated her quiet triumphs. One evening, after an especially uplifting day at school, Zoe and Daniel sat on their modest balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline. Daniel reached for her hand. "You know, all this talk of your skills and passion, it resonates with me because I see the real you. The woman who's worked so hard, silently, with so much heart." Zoe squeezed his hand, a smile unfolding. "It hasn't been easy, but it's worth it. I want the kids to remember more than just a lunch lady. I want them to see someone who hasn't let the world's expectations limit her." The bond between them fueled Zoe's determination. She wasn't just serving meals anymore, she was serving hope, resilience, and dignity. At school, whispers of change continued. The administration began discussing potential ways to better support the cafeteria staff, considering new funding for healthier ingredients or further training opportunities. Zoe was invited to join committees and offer her insights, her voice finally welcomed in conversations that once excluded her. The transformation was not just about status, it was about recognition of value in unexpected places. Zoe had become a symbol of perseverance and grace, showing that true talent and worth often hide beneath appearances that others might overlook. Even Lydia, observing from the sidelines, was forced to reckon with Zoe's rising influence. She watched as parents and teachers rallied behind Zoe, and the community's attitude shifted away from judgment to admiration. Though Lydia maintained a facade of civility, moments of vulnerability surfaced, brief glances, tightened jaws, and hesitations when speaking. Zoe understood that her path was still unfolding, that respect was built one day at a time. But the hidden strength in her soul, the quiet fire that refused to be extinguished by dismissive eyes, propelled her forward. With a renewed sense of purpose, Zoe looked ahead, ready for whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that she had finally been seen, not for the apron she wore, but for the woman she truly was. The weeks following Zoe's demonstration at the PTA meeting marked a decisive turning point, not just for her, but for the entire school community. The quiet yet resolute force of her talent and dedication had shifted perceptions, and the ripples reached farther than anyone had anticipated. Yet, the final chapters of this story were about to unravel with both justice and grace. Lydia Crane, once the towering voice of sharp criticism, now found herself in an uncomfortable position. Word had circulated to the mayor's office about the unease she stirred among staff and students alike. The mayor, known for his commitment to fairness and respect within the community, requested a meeting with the school principal and Lydia herself. The day Lydia was summoned to City Hall was marked by an unusual quietness among the PTA members. Rumors circulated that Lydia's conduct had been called into question not for her opinions, but for the manner in which she wielded her influence, undermining staff and creating an unhealthy environment. Sitting in a modest conference room, Lydia faced the mayor and the school principal, their expressions serious but fair. Mayor Harris spoke first, his tone measured but firm. "Lydia, your passion for the school is evident, but recent reports suggest that your approach has caused unnecessary friction. We must foster a supportive, respectful community, especially for those dedicated to our children's well-being." Lydia shifted in her seat, attempting a defensive response, but the mayor continued, "It's essential to recognize the value and professionalism of every member of this school's team. Therefore, we're asking the PTA to reevaluate its leadership roles and ensure collaborative rather than confrontational governance." Though Lydia was not removed outright, the message was clear: her influence would be curtailed, and her conduct monitored. The once unchallenged PTA president had lost ground. Privately, she wrestled with regret, the pristine image she had cultivated tarnished by impatience and unwarranted harshness. Meanwhile, at the school, the atmosphere radiated warmth and renewed respect. Zoe's role was no longer peripheral, she had become a linchpin in the school's culture. Following the mayor's visit and the PTA meeting, the school administration moved swiftly to formally recognize Zoe's exceptional contributions. One morning, during a school-wide assembly, the principal invited Zoe to the stage. The auditorium swelled with applause as Zoe stepped forward, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and humility. The principal spoke, "Today, we honor Zoe Marsh, whose dedication to our students' health and happiness inspires us all. Her innovative approach to school nutrition not only nourishes bodies but also enriches minds and spirits. Zoe, thank you for your hard work and passion." Zoe accepted the commendation, a certificate embossed with seals and signatures, but more than that, she accepted the acknowledgement of the community she so deeply cared for. Tears stung her eyes as she glanced over the crowd filled with smiling faces of the children, teachers, and parents who had come to respect and appreciate her. The months that followed brought tangible improvements. With the mayor's support, the school secured additional funding for kitchen supplies, new appliances, and the ability to source higher quality ingredients. Zoe was included in menu planning committees and encouraged to initiate educational programs about nutrition. Her home life blossomed alongside her professional one. Daniel continued to be her steadfast supporter, sharing in the celebrations and grounding Zoe during moments of exhaustion. Their relationship, simple and enduring, was a haven amid the constant flow of challenges and triumphs. One bright afternoon, as Zoe prepared meals in the now bustling but harmonious kitchen, a small group of students gathered nearby, eager to learn. Zoe was teaching them how to assemble a salad from garden-fresh vegetables donated by local farmers. "Why do you cook for us every day, Mrs. Marsh?" asked a little girl with wide eyes. Zoe knelt to meet her gaze, brushing a stray lock of hair back. "Because I believe every child deserves to eat food that helps them grow strong and healthy, not just for school, but for life." The children nodded solemnly, their understanding deepening. Zoe's smile was radiant. It was the kind of moment she had worked towards silently for so long. At school meetings, Lydia's presence had waned. She attended but contributed little. Her attempts to regain authority were met with polite, firm boundaries. Occasionally, Zoe wondered if Lydia regretted her past actions. Once, as she passed the PTA room, she caught Lydia's eyes briefly, not with hostility, but with something quieter, the hint of apology. One day, an unexpected letter arrived for Zoe from the mayor's office. It contained a personal note applauding her resilience and commitment, along with an invitation to serve as an advisor on a newly formed task force focused on improving school nutrition across the district. Zoe's heart swelled. This was more than recognition, it was validation that her voice mattered beyond the cafeteria walls. Her journey had taken her from the margins to the center, a testament to quiet strength and unwavering dedication. No longer invisible, she had become a symbol of hope and change. The story closed with Zoe standing in the school kitchen, surrounded by laughter and warmth. Children's voices echoed as they learned, tasted, and celebrated food and wellness. In that lively space, Zoe found a profound contentment, knowing that respect earned with grace and courage was the sweetest reward. To our viewers, what would you have done if you were in Zoe's shoes when faced with criticism and dismissal? Have you ever experienced unfair judgment, and how did you respond? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring real-life tales. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in our next story.